Fortunately, communities of color, when we do have cardiac arrest, we don't survive in the same percentages that other communities do. And I think part of that is implicit bias, and part of that is just ourselves. We don't have the same basic fundamental understandings throughout our community of learning this basic skill of performing high quality CPR.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Erkeda here with another fantastic guest, Dr. Aubrey Grant. I'm just going to give you an opportunity to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to medicine.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be here today. My journey through medicine has been long, and it's actually funny because I feel like I'm sort of right at the beginning of what has been quite a long journey. But I started at medical school at Meharry Medical College. I did my time there. I loved being at HBCU. Some of my closest friends at Meharry. I ended up doing medical residency at Emory University down in Atlanta. Spent 3 amazing years in Atlanta learning how to be an excellent internist. Then I got homesick, wanted to get back to the DMV area where I'm originally from, did my cardiology fellowship at Georgetown. Actually did fellowship at the same hospital I was born at, so it was an amazing sort of full circle moment for me. Did 3 years, learned all amazing things, thought I was going to go out and sort of join private practice, but I got an opportunity to become a sports cardiologist. So I spent a year in Boston learning how to be a sports cardiologist at the Massachusetts General Hospital. So I did that for a year, and now this is sort of my first job, real adult job as an attending physician. So I'm the director of sports and performance cardiology at MedStar Health. I have 2 days in Baltimore, doing clinic, and 2 days in DC. I help with most of the professional teams in the area, and I love it. And I'm super excited to talk with you and to discuss medicine and all the things that it has brought me to. So thank you for having me.
I love that story because I can pull out so many different things that are in alignment with my story. I am originally from the DC area. And I went to an HBCU, go HU, the real one, Hampton University. And also I lived in Boston. That's where I did med school. So it's crazy how life is connecting people. For those who are listening, Aubrey and I, we went to a conference that we spoke at together in Atlanta, and we just had such a great exchange of ideas, and there were so many phenomenal people there as speakers and panelists, but I invited him to the show, but we hadn't planted that. So it's always good to connect with people when you're meeting, go to these conferences and just learn about what each other is doing. You may make some great connections. You may learn something new.
I will tell you, the world of medicine is so, you just never know where it takes you. When I started this journey, I went to college in North Carolina, and I never would have thought I would be doing medical school in Nashville. So I got to live in Nashville. I always loved the DMV area, so I always knew I wanted to come home, but I never thought, life would take me to Boston. And the journey through medicine, you have to be willing to be nimble, because it certainly will take you places that you never thought it could take you. And the one thing that I have learned through this journey is to dream as big as possible. Because, when I was starting this, you would have never told me that I would be able to be a cardiologist for a professional sports team, but just being open to opportunity, being available, being nimble, being prayerful, being faithful, all those things sort of have supported my journey. So I'm just grateful.
That's so awesome. And as you mentioned, medicine can take you in so many places. So for the pre-meds out there, just to give you guys a quick little overview of the process. So of course you may be in that part of thinking about, do you want to go into medicine, or actually applying to medical school. So once you get in, and most of you do, and if you don't get in the first time, it's okay. There are people who definitely are amazing doctors who you've actually heard about on the show who may not have gotten in their first time. Just keep trying. And if you have any questions or want to know about any particular pain points, write into us and we'll definitely get back to you. But in the journey of medicine, you get into the med school that you may not have imagined going to school in Nashville. I know I didn't imagine going to school in Boston when I originally decided I wanted to become a doctor. But then when you get into medical school, then you have your different rotations, you have the match process. And that's kind of like a little draft in itself where your list kind of has to match with their list, and you kind of go where you go. And then from there, different opportunities arise. So don't ever close yourself off to an opportunity. Always be eager to learn and ask questions and kind of figure out, like, from those who've come before you, what their experience has been like.
I couldn't reiterate that anymore. When I was going to cardiology fellowship, I'll give this slight tangent. I had no idea what a sports cardiologist was. I didn't even know that existed. But, I met someone who said that that's what they did. And I asked questions and I said, hey, would you mind if I shadow you in clinic? And I got exposed and I got to become aware of this amazing field, this sort of like blooming field of cardiology. It's been sort of a wonderful journey to sort of learn about it, to sort of lead the development in this field and really to sort of ingratiate myself, in sports cardiology.
Absolutely. And I honestly didn't know that there were like specific cardiologists for a while for the sports teams now, but now more than ever, like, we're looking for them because all of these incidents that are happening in sports. So for those who may be thinking about high profile cases like Hamlin or Bronny James, like, what are your thoughts? And I know it's a little controversial on like people who have cardiac arrest and then they go back and they play.
Yeah. It's a really sort of nuanced conversation. Sudden cardiac arrest, essentially when your heart stops beating, is a really sort of rare and uncommon event, in particular in really healthy, well-trained athletes. It's rare that it happens. However, when it does happen, it's a really big deal. It devastates communities. It makes national headlines. We talk about it just because it's the unexpected. These people are, committed so much of their lives to physical fitness, and then to think that, their heart were to stop, it doesn't really sort of make sense. And the field of sports cardiology is really sort of supported by trying to increase awareness that this can happen. And number one, do two main things: increase the awareness of CPR education in our communities. In particular, Black and Brown communities really sort of do not have the same sort of understanding of CPR as, some of our other sort of majority communities. So we really sort of preach the message of everyone should understand how to perform basic CPR. That is a life skill like cooking, swimming, doing your taxes. Knowing how to perform good quality CPR at some point may save a life. And so we really sort of preach that message. One thing that, I really sort of harp on as a sports cardiologist is that exercise is critical for life. And rarely do I try to take someone away from sport or from exercise completely. And so when these events happen, we do community education, and then we do our best to figure out why this happened, and really sort of create plans that support the athlete to the best of our ability so they can be as safe as possible as they continue to do sport.
That's awesome. And I think that you brought up a very valid point that we definitely need to spread education as well as having everyone out there knowing how to do CPR. Like, of course, we have to know how to do it in medicine and in daycares, but those are the places, like, there are people who are everywhere and it can happen anywhere. And especially in underserved communities or minority communities, Black communities, Latino communities, a lot of people don't go to the courses or don't know what to do when they're at the swimming pools and things like that. So we definitely have to continue to spread awareness and let people know that there are other opportunities to learn a skill that could potentially save someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, communities of color, when we do have cardiac arrest, we don't survive in the same percentages that other communities do. And I think part of that is implicit bias, and part of that is just, ourselves. We don't have the same basic fundamental understandings throughout our community of learning this, basic skill of performing high quality CPR. So I encourage everyone, to go get their training in CPR, go get a certification, because at some point you can save a life.
Absolutely. So, in addition to your clinical job, you're also the Chief Equity Officer of Equity Commons. Can you tell us about that organization?
Yeah. So my clinical job I love, and I love being a sports cardiologist, but what wakes me up every day is my work with Equity Commons. And so Equity Commons is a virtual reality company that uses the Google Oculus technology to create virtual reality scenarios to train people on implicit bias. And it is a beautiful collaboration between health, equity, and technology. to really sort of use tech to solve real world problems that exist, in particular in clinical medicine. The origin story of Equity Commons is another example of, just the beautiful ways in which medicine sort of takes you in places you never thought it was going to be. So I did my residency at Emory University, and I did my senior grand rounds talk on implicit bias. And implicit bias is the bias that we have that we're not really sort of aware of, So there's explicit and implicit bias is problematic because we don't really always know that we're doing it or that we're, perpetuating this level of bias. And so I gave a grand rounds on it and the ways that it really sort of affects the way we take care of patients. I mean, at the end of the grand rounds, everyone's like, this is such a big problem, Aubrey. I really sort of recognize this as an issue, but what's next? What can we do about it to really fix it? And I scoured the literature, and there were no really tried and true fixes to this big problem. And so I was chatting with a good friend of mine who just at the same time happened to be doing an innovation fellowship. And she mentioned how, perhaps we could use virtual reality to create real world scenarios that allow people to create radical empathy. And in that empathy, we work past people's biases. And so we've been doing this for, quite some time, building these virtual reality scenarios, really sort of creating training structures that allow people to really sort of experience what it's like to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And the impact is palpable.
I think that is so powerful because we have a lot of conversations, especially in the recent days of, okay, there's a lot of bias out there. Okay, yes, we have healthcare disparities, but why? Are we going to change it? And a lot of times we just go through clicking something, a little document that you have to read just to get through the day. And I think that we have to push and advocate for more than that because we see that there is disproportionate mortality and morbidity, especially for Black and Brown people in the communities. And we have to kind of push the needle and encourage people to want to learn more, to do more in their trainings, to actually try to advocate against this. Like we've seen on the larger scales that we love to throw around the phrase social determinants of health. It's kind of like a buzzword now, but it's more than that. And like you said, some of it isn't even intentional. Like I was reading recently that there was a program where they were doing facial recognition with AI, and in Asian communities, or this particular Asian community that the writer was talking about, they kind of read the face of someone being very stern with a straight face. And they read that as them being upset or frustrated, when in actuality in her culture, it meant that they were happy. So we're using our lens or the particular lens of that person to judge others and have these preconceived notions. And that's only going to perpetuate further things. So we've seen the stories like Serena Williams and Beyonce and the people who are in very high socioeconomic status still having these near-death experiences because people have judged them. People don't listen to them. People think that they aren't experiencing pain. And I love that Equity Commons is working to kind of change the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We are really sort of focused on bringing the humanity back into medicine. Unfortunately, what COVID has taught us is that taking care of people and working in healthcare is hard. And hospitals are busy. We work long hours. You're oftentimes very stressed. You're making critical life decisions. But in these moments, that's when implicit bias tends to creep in the most. That's when you need to be the most thoughtful and the most intentional about how you're taking care of people, how you're listening to people, and the humanity and the empathy that you're providing to them. And so through Equity Commons, through these virtual reality scenarios, we build that out and we develop that. And you mentioned a lot of the trainings that we currently have on implicit bias. And what we know and what's clear is they don't really sort of move the needle. They're not solving the problem. And so, our company is using innovation. We're using technology to really sort of think about this in a really sort of innovative way to try to solve real world problems.
I think that that's amazing. And I love that you brought up the point of we're utilizing innovation. A lot of times, especially in traditional medicine, and we're moving forward, we're in 2023, so things are advancing a little more in medical education. But they're a little afraid. We're thinking that AI is going to take our jobs and things like that. And that's not true. Like, we have to add that humanity to medicine, but also utilize tech so that we can reach more people. We can do more things and things that are exciting. So I love to hear that there are innovation fellowships out there and there are people out there doing non-traditional careers, because a lot of times, especially in medicine, when you get to residency, you're like, okay, I'm going to choose my field in medicine and in medical school, match. I'm going to do that for 30 years. Personally, I'm a family medicine physician, and I love my people. I was like, okay, I'm going to come back home to the DMV area and I'm going to be a community health center doctor. And life changes, and life definitely led in a different direction, but you have to be adaptable to change and also open to it and open to innovation, because it can open up so many doors. So if you weren't necessarily open when you did your senior project and everyone was like, okay, what's next? You would be like, I don't know, somebody got to do it. But you look into it and then you were like, okay, how can I collaborate and innovate with someone else who's doing different things that are amazing and bring it to the masses? So not only are you helping people in healthcare, you're helping organizations thrive and other things that we need to push the needle in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit so many key points in what you just said. I mean, one of the big things that I attribute to my success is collaboration, right? And so I have surrounded myself with an amazing team of people that we are able to sort of work together and work in tandem to sort of push the conversation forward about a conversation that we're all really so passionate about. So, themes of, putting yourself in places with like-minded people that are also really passionate about the same things you are can be really, really, really helpful in order to keep the creative juices going and really sort of pushing the needle forward to, solving worldwide problems. And that has been so, so important to me. The other point that you mentioned, you mentioned that you were a family physician at a community health center. But, what I have learned in my journey is those experiences taking care of people, those experiences in the community, those experiences sort of on the ground are so valuable, not only obviously in helping that person that you're taking care of, but you could take that experience on a larger scale and think about working for health tech companies or think about working in a career in public health or public policy. And so those experiences as a practitioner, could open so many doors to really sort of expand your career in ways that you might not have always thought of.
Absolutely. And it just comes to taking the leap, taking the meeting, being open to new experiences. I'm sure I've talked about myself over here for 2 years, but for those who are new listeners, as a family physician, we ended up going into a union, which we can have an episode on that because I'm pro-union. To some healthcare people are not, but I ended up leading the union for 18 months in the contract negotiations, things that I would never have thought that I would experience or do. And then I transitioned into the telehealth space and have grown in that way. And now I'm a healthcare consultant. But if I had continued to stay in that box, like, oh no, I need to see this one-on-one patient, I wouldn't be able to affect patients from a higher level, thousands of patients at a time. So it's always a good idea to be open-minded and to also figure out that life isn't linear. So it's all about the journey. So if you have an opportunity, you may want to take it. If not, it's okay. You don't have to do everything. You may not be in that life space. I have a lot of friends now who are in that transitional period where you guys think you're going to have your med school itch where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I'm thinking about this now because I just came from a reunion where I was mentoring some students and they're all worried about what they want to do in their future. And I kind of sat them down and I was like, yes, that's very important to figure out if you want to be an anesthesiologist or a radiologist or whatever you want to be. But life happens. And I definitely know people who have been gung-ho when they came into the first year of medical school saying, I'm going to be an OBGYN, but they didn't have their rotation until the end of the year. And when they got to that rotation, they're like, okay, so what's next? Because I'm not doing this. Or I've had a friend who actually was on the show. If you want to listen to the episode about someone who transitioned from being an orthopod. She came in gung-ho. First of all, Black women ortho, like that's very difficult to get into. And she did it. But in her second year, she decided that she didn't like it and she transferred, and now she's a very happy radiology attending. So you can make these choices, but you're not stuck. And that's why it's good, like you said, to have that collaboration and these people you can talk to. I like to call it my personal board of directors, because you don't go to everybody for everything. Everyone has their little area of expertise, but you have a team of people who are rooting for you, who want to do the best for you, and who can collaborate with you.
Listen, I thought I was going to do primary care. I thought I was going to do GI. I've thought about all the things. And, fortunately, I landed in sports cardiology, and that is a beautiful fit for me. But part of the journey, I think one of the lessons that I've learned in this, and I call it a journey because it truly is a journey, right? It's a bunch of sort of squiggly lines that, are always sort of pushing forward, but, sometimes they go forward, sometimes they go backward. At the end of the day, you're always sort of taking strides forward. But the process is full with so many experiences that are so valuable, that make you who you are, that make you the provider, the person, that you become to be. And it's so those experiences are so valuable. My experience of being in the South and taking people there, my experience of living in Boston and being in a culture shock and being in Boston and taking care of people in the North. All of that sort of supports my understanding of healthcare, and that experience, that journey, as someone who's sort of gone through that process, I can testify that truly, truly is valuable. I think when you're going through it, you kind of just put your head down and you're like, oh, this is stressful. Like, this is hard. Like, I want it to be done. I want it to be over. But I think some advice I would give is, try to pause and take moments to really sort of appreciate the process.
Absolutely. So I love asking my guests this question because I have such a diverse amount of answers. If you had a magic wand and you could change absolutely anything about healthcare, what would you change?
Well, I would make healthcare not biased. That's our slogan. Equity Commons, we're building a world without bias. And that is what my work is in support of. And we live in a society that is full. I have my own personal biases. But the work that we do is we confront that. And we don't just sort of accept what our biases are and stop there. We have conversations. We have uncomfortable conversations, and we move forward in a way that supports equity. And that is what we're all trying to do. We all sort of want a seat at the table. These things that you talk about, social determinants of health, and the inequities that exist. I wrote my mission statement about this when I was applying to medical school in 2011. And so we're still having some of the same conversations. I'm thankful that we've been slowly able to push the needle forward, but certainly there's much, much work to be done. I think one of the things that, having been in healthcare for some time now, I think a way to look at it could be with frustration, right? Because there are so many issues. However, you could also certainly look at that as an opportunity. There are so many issues. Just pick one problem and try to fix it, And that's what I always encourage some of my mentees is just pick one problem that you see within healthcare and think of a way to solve that problem on a large scale. And certainly you will leave your mark on healthcare and try to, make this place a little bit better and a little bit easier to take care of people. So if I had my magic wand, bias will be gone.
I love that. How would you suggest that students who are eager to address biases, whether or not they're in the healthcare system or particularly maybe in their medical institution or their training, how would you suggest that they work to start doing that now?
Yeah, so I always recommend people, first off, understand what your own personal biases are. And there's several ways you could do it. There's implicit association tests that you can take online, or you could just do some deep self-reflection and sort of think about ways that you have been biased, in your day-to-day life. And certainly that self-reflection might lead you to a point where you're like, oh, wow, shoot, this is crazy. I didn't expect that. But that is sort of step one, is sort of recognizing the way bias exists in you. And then once you do that, you see bias in everything, right? And so that was my journey is, I learned what bias was. And when I was a resident, I saw how much it was a problem. And then I started seeing it in everything that I did, not only in healthcare, but in my daily life. And then it became my passion, and then it became my life's work, to try to mitigate this, because I saw just sort of the negative effects it had on our community. So recognize your bias, step one, and then begin to see it sort of in everything that you do. Additionally, encouraging students to advocate for anti-racism curriculum as a part of their education process. It's interesting. So, at this point, I've done 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship, and another year of advanced fellowship. And all throughout that time, no one ever trained me on implicit bias. I never had dedicated anti-racism curriculum throughout that coursework period, but that's a problem, right? We certainly understand, we've known for decades that this is a big part of health inequity. We need to be specifically and intentionally training our new leaders of tomorrow about how to be less and anti-racist. And so certainly students can advocate for that in their career.
I definitely agree with that. And for the students out there who may not think that their voice matters, I will kind of reflect back to when I was in medical school. It's a couple of years before you, and just a couple. And my first year, there was a dean who made some inappropriately racial targeted statements, and the students stood up and they held a meeting with them, and they advocated for change. So with us speaking up, hosting meetings, not sitting down in silence, we were able to incorporate and co-create a cultural competence curriculum for the first year students that's about 2 weeks long. And I was thinking about how old I am, guys. I'm 11 years out of medical school. So that means that this was incorporated 14 years ago, and the students are still having it. So that is amazing. So I want you guys to think about what change you want and go after it. It's not too early. Yes, you may not have MD or DO behind your name, but you have power, and you are the future of medicine and the future of healthcare. And if you want to be the change, be it.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful thing, man. Honestly, students actually are, when they're paying tuition, they are the customer of the institution, right? And so the institution is also there to serve them as well. And, at the end of the day, students become MDs, they become physicians, which shape our healthcare workforce. And that voice is so powerful. Those are the voices that make up the base of what is taking care of our nation. And that voice is certainly very powerful. And that starts as soon as you get into medical school. Your first day, your voice matters. And so I certainly would, encourage, all the listeners to this podcast to find your voice, find the issues that you're passionate about, and be very loud about it.
Absolutely. So you shared so many pearls of wisdom with us, ranging from sports medicine all the way to advocating for patients' rights and anti-racism and bias. So we definitely want you to be a friend of the show, but our time has come to a close. So I just want to give you an opportunity to say goodbye to our listeners and let them know how they can reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, beyond all the things that, I've learned in the journey, I think the one that is most pressing to me is that, if I was going to tell you that I would be sitting here doing the job that I'm doing today when I started, I would have never believed you. Right. And so I would certainly encourage people to, think about whatever you want to do in life. Think about the goals that you have, and then multiply that by 10. Dream as big as you can ever imagine it, because it's possible. Be hardworking, do the work, be committed, be persistent, be faithful. With all of that, you can accomplish so many things. And I certainly would not have believed it if you told me that when I was starting this process. But certainly I want to be as encouraging as possible and know that, anything is possible. As far as connecting with me, I'm on most socials. You can find me, on on, all the things, Instagram, LinkedIn, et cetera. My company is equity-commons.com. So please feel free to reach out. We're on Equity Commons on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter as well. I would love to connect with anyone and chat about ways that we can sort of build, a more equitable healthcare workforce, a more equitable healthcare space for taking care of patients.
Thank you so much. And for all of the listeners out there, if you have any questions or if you have any particular topics or guests that you want us to invite to the show, you can definitely reach out to me on my Instagram at Dr. DOCTOR, the letter D, Graham, Dr. D Graham, or our Med School Coaches at Med School Coach, and let us know what you want to hear. And we'll see you again next week with another fantastic guest. Bye.
Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.